right. So this is the first lecture that I am going to do from the textbook Interplay by Adler, Rosenfeld, and Proctor. I'm trying to minimize this. Okay. This is a brand new edition. It's different enough from the last edition that I really kind of had no choice and had to go with the new book. Okay. In my opinion, this is, of all the interpersonal communication textbooks that I've looked at, this is really the best. And so, unfortunately, textbooks are expensive. This is no different, but I hope that you actually get an awful lot out of the book. So, that said, what's going on? Okay. Every chapter is, divided into usually 4 sections, sometimes a little bit more. And what I will do with the lectures is I'm going to do 4 separate mini recordings. So this one's going to be why we communicate, and then I'll do the communication process, etc. The lectures are no substitute for the textbook. You really need to read the textbook and listen to the lecture. I don't know whether you're going to listen and then read the section, or read the section and then listen, but you cannot do one without the other. If you look in the textbook on page 3, it's nicely set up. The very first page of every chapter, well, actually the second page, the first page is always a picture. The second page lays out the learning objectives, and then it looks at the outline, which is kind of these 4. It breaks it down a little bit more. It tells you about certain features, and it lets you know that at the end of the chapter, there are ways that you can check your understanding. There's a list of key terms, and those key terms are really important to know, because that's how you show that you can speak the language of the field. And there are various activities that you can do to increase your understanding of the information in this chapter. So basically, we're going to look at why we communicate. I don't know if you've ever really thought about it before. You're probably at the we communicate because we communicate, because we're human beings, and that's what human beings do. So let's take a look. Social scientists, communication scientists, have identified 4 different kinds of needs that are met through our communication. I encourage you to take a look at the interesting and horrifying story that they talk about Frederick II, the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, back in 1220, who did an experiment to figure out what if children were not communicated with, what language would they actually start speaking. And basically what he found out was if children aren't interacted with, they die. So you, as they say in the textbook, you might have noticed during COVID, when we were not going out very much, a lot of you maybe did not have to work, or even if you were working, you weren't interacting with as many people as possible. Your communication suffered. An idea that's going to kind of weave through this first section is the idea of loneliness, and we will get there. But in terms of physical needs, basically, we need to communicate to be physically and mentally and emotionally healthy, right? Not everybody likes to talk an awful lot. I talk a lot in class. I am not someone who seeks out interactions with people outside of the workday. I am a little more on the introversion scale, meaning even though I enjoy talking with people, I find it exhausting. But if I were to go out and pitch a tent in the woods and not interact with people, and assuming that, I was sleeping well and I was drinking enough water and I was eating well, I still would probably not be physically healthy because I wouldn't be communicating with people. And let me say, and we'll get to this in section 2, but when I say communicating, I don't only mean speaking, right? It can be communicating via text or any kind, using social media in any way. Even writing a letter is I know people don't write letters very much. So there's some fascinating information about why communication is so necessary. And I thought this one, for some reason, this stands out in my mind, that they did a meta-analysis. So a meta-analysis means they analyzed a lot of different studies. And in this case, there were 150 studies that were analyzed. And these 150 studies altogether dealt with 300,000 participants. So I think we can say that the sample size was pretty big. So the results are probably statistically significant and valid. But they found that socially connected people live an average of 3.7 years longer than those who are socially isolated. Okay, on page 6 there are 3 bullets, and I think those are interesting bullets to look at. And I wanted to say what you'll notice is in this textbook there are a lot of parenthetical citations, meaning the authors of this textbook are referring to other studies. If you are interested, you can always go to the back of the book and look it up by the authors of these various studies. So because this is an introductory text, kind of an overview text, it's not going to go into a lot of detail about the studies. But I want to assure you that the textbook does not make a statement unless they can back it up with studies that have been done. Okay, so anyways, those are the physical needs. The second kind of need that is satisfied by communication are identity needs. I think I just switched agreement there. I went from need to needs, but it's okay. So we will talk about this in chapter 4, the idea of who are we. But so let me just give you a little preview. Let's say that somehow you were able to grow up all alone on a desert island and you were with no other people. Would you be tall? Would you be short? Would you be funny? Would you be serious? How would you know? We, in a sense, don't know who we are until we communicate with other people and they let us know who we are, or we figure out who we are in relationship to other people. So keep this idea in the back of your mind and remember that we will go into much more detail about this in chapter 4. So some of you might know the story about, well, it's all in the textbook, so you can read it. Okay. The third one is social needs, and that idea is many animals are social animals. They interact with others of their species, and human beings are no different. That we have the need. Now, beyond who we are, beyond our well-being, we have a need to connect socially. And again, not everyone wants to, connect to as many people as possible. But even if you are someone who prefers, but let me clarify this. If you are neurologically typical, you will have the need to have social interactions with people. If you are neurologically atypical, possibly if you're on the autism spectrum, or people who are on the spectrum, they maybe don't have as strong a need. So Okay, so basically it says that communication is crucial to social satisfaction. Evidence suggests that many people aren't very successful managing their interpersonal relationships. So many people have not interacted with their neighbors, right? And that can lead to some dissatisfaction with our lives. All right. The last need that communication can satisfy is a practical need, where you could say something like, can you please turn the light on? And it could be, the practical needs would be, how can you communicate effectively wherever it is that you work? And you can see every chapter is going to have a section called At Work. And so just because it's in a box, it doesn't look like the regular text, please don't skip it. It's got good information there. All right. This section of the textbook refers to, it ends with the idea of Abraham Maslow, who was a psychologist and who created his hierarchy of needs. It's worthwhile Googling to see the picture of his hierarchy of needs. And when you look at that, if you look at every single, there's 5 layers, I guess. Every single piece of this hierarchy, communication fits into. So to be a human being is to communicate. All right, so I want to show you 2 more slides. There is I've made a separate link to this video in Blackboard. I will show it to you in class, or when you're watching this, I will have already shown it to you. It's a man by the name of John Francis who spent many, many years on his own, completely alone, not talking to other people. And one of the things that, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. This will be really the topic of our discussion primarily when we meet next week, Wednesday. And some of this is a preview of topics that are going to be covered in chapter 2 when it talks about social comparison in chapter 4. The role of listening is chapter 8, and interpersonal relationships, which are chapter 10 and 11. So definitely watch this. And as you're watching it, I want you to think about some of these ideas. Okay. Who is most likely to experience loneliness? Have digital communication and social media increased or decreased the loneliness? Do you think there is an epidemic of loneliness? And if so, can you cite examples of people in your life who are feeling lonely? I put a link here to Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. I will actually also upload the link. It talks about loneliness. And there's one more slide here with a couple more questions. This is from this is kind of a wrap up of this chapter. So if you have this section of the chapter, if you have understood this section of the chapter, you should be able to say, tell me what are the 4 different needs that communication satisfies. That's kind of basic. And then you're going to apply it more to your life and your situation to think about how are these 4 communication needs met differently in different types of relationships. So think about a friend of yours. Think about a family member. Think about someone you work with or possibly go to school with. And then think about, okay, in this relationship, how are my physical needs, identity needs, social needs, and practical needs met via how does communication help me meet these 4 needs in a friendship, in a romantic relationship, in a family relationship, in a more professional relationship. Okay, so that is the first section. I'm going to take a break. I'm encouraging you to take a break, to get up, to walk around, to think about these ideas, to go back into the chapter, to say, that didn't make any sense, what she said. Let me read the book to make sure that I understand it. And always write down questions that you have so we can make sure that we discuss them in class. And now I'm going to try to get out of here and stop this video.